He looked right through me. The boss of a $2.1 billion company refused to shake my hand in front of everyone at the company gala. I smiled politely and walked away. 24 hours later, his entire empire collapsed. Hundreds of people lost their jobs, and federal agents were leading him out in handcuffs. And I'm the reason why. My name is Sarah, I'm 30 years old, and I never intended to become a whistleblower. I was just trying to do my job. But sometimes life has a way of forcing your hand, and what happened that night changed everything. Let me take you back to where this all started. 3 years ago, I was hired as a senior financial analyst at Meridian Capital Group, one of the largest investment firms on the East Coast. It was my dream job. Fresh out of business school with my MBA, drowning in student debt, and finally landing a six-figure position at a prestigious firm. I thought I'd made it. The boss, Richard Blackwood, was a legend in the finance world. 62 years old, silver hair, custom Italian suits, and a reputation for being ruthless but brilliant. Forbes had featured him twice. He'd built Meridian from a small hedge fund into a multi-billion-dollar empire over 30 years. Everyone wanted to work for him. Everyone wanted to be him. I was assigned to the internal audit team, which sounds boring, I know. But in a company managing that much money, internal audit is crucial. We made sure every transaction was legitimate, every account balanced, every regulation followed. It was detail-oriented work, and I loved it. My supervisor, Patricia Chen, was a 55-year-old woman who'd been with the company for 20 years. She was sharp, no nonsense, and she taught me everything about corporate finance. She was also one of the few people who seemed immune to Blackwood's charm. Never trust an executive who's too charismatic, she told me during my first week. The best leaders are boring. They focus on the numbers, not the spotlight. I didn't understand what she meant then. I do now. For 3 years, I did my job. I reviewed accounts, checked transactions, filed reports. Everything seemed normal. Meridian was profitable, growing steadily, and Blackwood was still the golden boy of Wall Street. Then, 6 months ago, something changed. I was assigned to audit a series of offshore investment accounts. Routine work, nothing special. These were client accounts held in the Cayman Islands, perfectly legal for international investors. I'd reviewed similar accounts dozens of times, but this time, something felt off. The transaction patterns were strange. Large sums moving in and out at irregular intervals, amounts that didn't match the client investment statements. And when I cross-referenced the account numbers with our client database, several didn't exist. I spent 3 days going through the records. At first, I thought it was just a clerical error. Maybe someone had transposed some numbers, or there was a filing mistake. It happens, but the more I dug, the worse it got. There were 37 offshore accounts that had no corresponding clients. Over the past 5 years, these accounts had processed transactions totaling over $2.1 billion. Money was flowing in from Meridian client accounts, getting shuffled through these phantom accounts, and then disappearing. I sat in my cubicle at 11 p.m. on a Thursday night, staring at my computer screen, and I felt sick. This wasn't a clerical error. This was fraud. Massive, systematic fraud. Someone was stealing from our clients. And based on the authorization codes on the transactions, there were only 3 people in the company with access to create and manage these accounts: Patricia, our CFO Martin Reeves, and Richard Blackwood himself. I didn't sleep that night. I went home to my small apartment in Brooklyn, and I sat on my couch until sunrise trying to figure out what to do. If I was right, this was the biggest financial fraud I'd ever seen. Clients were being robbed. Retirement funds, college savings, life savings, gone. And if the SEC found out, Meridian would collapse. Thousands of employees would lose their jobs. Innocent people who had nothing to do with this would suffer. But if I was wrong, if there was some legitimate explanation I was missing, I could destroy my career. You don't accuse a billionaire executive of fraud without being absolutely certain. I needed to talk to Patricia. Friday morning, I arrived at the office at 6 a.m. Patricia was always there early. I found her in her office, already on her third cup of coffee. "We need to talk," I said, closing the door. I showed her everything: the phantom accounts, the missing clients, the transaction patterns. She listened without interrupting, her face getting paler with every page I showed her. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "How many people have seen this?" she asked quietly. "Just me." "Don't show anyone else." "Not yet." She stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "I need to verify this independently. If you're right..." She trailed off. "If I'm right, what do we do?" "Then we watch him burn." I didn't want to go. I wanted to hide in my apartment and pretend none of this was happening. But Patricia insisted. "Act normal," she said. "We can't let anyone know we're investigating. Go to the gala, smile, network. I'll work on verifying your findings over the weekend." So I put on my only cocktail dress, a simple black number I'd bought for my college roommate's wedding, and took the subway to the Plaza Hotel. The ballroom was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, waiters carrying trays of champagne. I felt completely out of place. Everyone else seemed so comfortable in this world of wealth and power. I grabbed a glass of champagne and tried to blend into the background. That's when I saw him. Richard Blackwood was holding court in the center of the room, surrounded by admirers. He was laughing at something, his hand on the shoulder of a state senator. He looked so confident, so untouchable. And I knew. In that moment, watching him bask in admiration, I knew he was guilty. Patricia appeared beside me. "I verified the first batch of transactions," she whispered. "You're right, it's all real." My stomach dropped. "What now?" "Monday morning, we go to the board. But tonight, we act like nothing's wrong." She drifted away to talk to someone else, leaving me alone with my champagne and my secrets. I decided to network like I was supposed to. I introduced myself to a few people, made small talk about the market and the weather. Everyone was friendly enough, but there was an invisible hierarchy at these events. I was a 30-year-old analyst. I didn't matter. Then someone suggested I should meet Mr. Blackwood. "Oh, he loves meeting the young talent," a senior vice president told me. "Come on, I'll introduce you." Before I could protest, I was being led across the ballroom toward the executive. The group around Blackwood parted as we approached. The senior VP got his attention. "Richard, I wanted to introduce you to one of our rising stars. This is Sarah Martinez. She's on Patricia's audit team." I extended my hand, smiling nervously. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Blackwood." He looked at me, really looked at me. His eyes were cold, assessing, and then he glanced at my outstretched hand like it was something distasteful. He didn't take it. Instead, he turned back to the senator he'd been talking to and continued his conversation as if I didn't exist. The senior VP's face went red. "Richard, I was just..." Blackwood held up one finger, silencing him, still not looking at me. The message was clear. I wasn't important enough to interrupt his conversation. I wasn't important enough to acknowledge. I stood there for maybe 5 seconds with my hand extended, though it felt like an hour. Everyone was watching. The whole circle had gone quiet. Finally, I lowered my hand. "Excuse me," I said quietly, and walked away. Poor thing. Did you see that? I made it to the bathroom before the tears came. I locked myself in a stall and tried to breathe. He'd humiliated me. In front of everyone. And why? Because I was nobody to him. Just another faceless employee, not worth 5 seconds of his precious time. I wanted to leave. I wanted to quit. I wanted to disappear. Instead, I dried my eyes, fixed my makeup, and walked back out into that ballroom with my head high. And I made a decision. Monday morning, I wasn't just going to report the fraud. I was going to make absolutely certain that Richard Blackwood faced every consequence he deserved. I spent the entire weekend gathering evidence. Patricia and I worked around the clock, building an airtight case. We documented every transaction. We traced the money flows. We identified which clients had been stolen from and exactly how much they'd lost. We created timelines, spreadsheets, and reports that a 5-year-old could understand. By Sunday night, we had proof that Richard Blackwood had systematically embezzled $2.1 billion from client accounts over 5 years. He'd created shell companies, fake investment opportunities, and phantom accounts. He'd stolen from retirees, from college funds, from people who trusted him with their life savings, and he'd been clever about it. The amounts were spread out over hundreds of accounts. No single client lost enough to trigger immediate red flags. It was death by 1,000 cuts, and it had been going on for years. Why now? I asked Patricia as we reviewed the final documents. Why did we just find this now? She shook her head. Because he got greedy. Look at the transaction volume over the past 6 months. It's doubled. He was accelerating. Maybe he was planning to run, or maybe he just thought he was invincible. What happens Monday? We go to the board first thing. They'll have no choice but to contact the SEC immediately. From there. She looked at me seriously. Sarah, this is going to explode. The media will be everywhere. The company will probably collapse. People will lose their jobs. Are you ready for that? Was I ready? I thought about Blackwood's face when he looked through me like I was nothing. I thought about all the people he'd stolen from. Yes, I said. I'm ready. Monday morning at 7 a.m., Patricia and I walked into an emergency board meeting with our evidence. By 8 a.m., the board had contacted their lawyers. By 9 a.m., the SEC was on the phone. By 10 a.m., federal agents were in the building. By 11 a.m., Richard Blackwood was being escorted from his office in handcuffs. I watched from my cubicle window as they led him out the front entrance. There were already news crews outside. Someone had tipped off the media. Camera flashes went off like lightning as the agents walked him to their car. He saw me in the window. For just a second, our eyes met. He didn't look angry. He looked shocked. Like he couldn't believe this was happening to him. Like he was invincible and reality had just proven him wrong. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched. By noon, Meridian stock had been suspended. By end of day, the company was in receivership. By the end of the week, over 800 employees had been laid off. It was devastating. People I'd worked with for 3 years lost their jobs. Good people who had nothing to do with Blackwood's crimes were unemployed because of what I'd uncovered. I felt guilty. Even though I knew I'd done the right thing, I felt guilty. But then the SEC released their preliminary findings. The stolen money was being recovered. Clients were getting their investments back. Yes, Meridian collapsed, but the fraud had been stopped before it could get worse. And Blackwood? He was charged with wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and about 15 other felonies. He was looking at 30 years in federal prison. That was 6 months ago. Patricia and I both found new jobs quickly. Turns out companies value analysts who catch billion-dollar fraud schemes. I'm at a smaller firm now, making more money, doing work I actually believe in. Richard Blackwood pleaded guilty last month. He got 25 years. At 62, he'll be 87 when he gets out, if he lives that long. The senior VP who tried to introduce me that night? He called to apologize. Turns out he'd been mortified by Blackwood's behavior. He's helping with the prosecution now. And me? I think about that night at the gala sometimes. About standing there with my hand extended, being dismissed like I was nothing. Richard Blackwood thought I didn't matter. He thought he was untouchable, that people like me were beneath his notice. He was wrong. Sometimes the people you dismiss are the ones who bring down your entire empire. Sometimes karma works overnight. And sometimes refusing to shake someone's hand is the biggest mistake you'll ever make. I didn't set out to destroy Richard Blackwood. I just did my job. But I won't lie. Watching him get what he deserved felt pretty good. The moral of the story? Treat people with respect. You never know who you're really dealing with. And to Richard Blackwood, wherever you are in federal prison, you should have shaken my hand. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share. And remember, karma is real.